put aside our really our prejudices for Western medicine being the best. It's important, I think, in all fields, to professionalize and educate people to become leaders.
Welcome to The Conversation. On today's episode of Trailblazers, Johnny is speaking to Stephen Wood, Director of Acute Care Nurse Practitioner Program and the Director of Field Operations for World Extreme Medicine. We hope you enjoy, and be sure to subscribe and follow us on social.
Stephen, absolute pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it. For those that may not be familiar with yourself, do you want to give a little bit of background as to who you are, the work that you've been doing, and where your journey began, basically?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Stephen Wood. I'm currently the program director and assistant professor at Northeastern University in Boston for two programs. The program director for the Acute Care Nurse Practitioner Program, as well as what I think we're going to be mostly talking about today, which is the Extreme Medicine Program, at both, again, at Northeastern University in Boston. My journey has been a little circuitous. I started out actually thinking I was going to go into forestry. I grew up in rural New Hampshire. My grandfather was a farmer. My dad had his degree in forestry and actually taught forestry and botany at the high school that I went to. I really loved plants and working with the soil. I loved the chemistry and organic chemistry and biochemistry of those fields. And so I had graduated college thinking I was actually going to go into forestry. But I took a side road and became an EMT and really fell in love with that. I spent 8 years as a paramedic working in the Metro Boston area as a paramedic. I then said, this has been fun, but I want to do something else. I went and got a bachelor's in biology with every intention of maybe applying to medical school or becoming a PA. But that got sidetracked as well. I finished my degree in biology and I got a job at Boston MedFlight. And that's the helicopter EMS program that serves pretty much most of Massachusetts and parts of New Hampshire. And said, I'll do this for a couple of years and then I'll apply to do something different. Started doing a master's degree in toxicology during that time frame. And then 9 years later, I realized, whoa, I think I missed my mark of the 2-year, kind of move on mode. So I said, all right, well, here we are. We're, maybe I'm a little too old to be applying to other, schools or programs. I have a master's in toxicology. Maybe we should, utilize that. I went to the New Hampshire State Police, worked in the tox lab there. It was kind of fun. They have a forensics lab, but I really missed doing medicine. So I went back, became a nurse, and then a nurse practitioner. And I'd worked, for about 12 years in the emergency department, really loving, that role, loving that field. COVID then hit. I moved to the ICU and spent 3 years in the intensive care unit, eventually helping develop a nurse practitioner program at one of our major Boston tertiary care centers. And from there said, I think I've done my time in medicine and moved into academia. I still have some role in the emergency department. I work a couple of shifts a month. In fact, I worked yesterday, but primarily I'm now the program director for those two programs, helping to build those programs and bring students in and hopefully share my my knowledge and also bringing in other instructors and professors to share their knowledge and really build just a community.
I mean, the journey that you've had is utterly incredible. What was the moment where, from taking it right back to where you had that intersection of, forestry and then, deciding to take that side route, was there a pivotal moment? Was there something that changed? Was there something that happened? What prompted the sudden directional change that you took?
Yeah, it actually. So my dad at the time was the director of what were called applied sciences. And so that was botany, forestry, but also things like architecture. They had auto mechanics. They had, a bunch of other programs. And he was just talking to us at dinner and said, yeah, I'm starting this new program. It's for people who want to go into the healthcare professions. And, said people who want to, become paramedics or nurses or pharmacists or physicians. And for whatever reason, that just clicked. I took the course and just really loved working with people and working in medicine. And, I really liked the pharmacology behind that, the science behind that. And so I was able to kind of take the best of both worlds to some degree. And, really it just started, that's what started me on the path. It was just, he kind of talked about it at dinner and I said, that sounds really interesting, really fun. I'm going to give it a try. And you had an opportunity to try out a few different professions. So we got to leave class. And they trusted us to do that and go spend some time in the emergency department, or you could go to the ICU, or you could spend time in a pharmacy. I got to spend some time riding along with the paramedics in the community, and that was it. As soon as I went on that first call, I knew what I wanted to do.
That's absolutely amazing. And it sounds like you've obviously got this natural lean into helping people to, have that positive impact, I suppose, on the lives of others. And, I suppose that's kind of leads us nicely to the work that you're doing currently with like World Extreme Medicine.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about the role, what you are doing within that, and a little bit more about World Extreme Medicine.
Yeah, sure. So the journey there actually started, in my career as a paramedic. I worked in a city where we actually had a lot of some large scale emergencies. It was one of the cities right outside of Boston, and it's a very small community, very very much marginalized. In fact, it had been taken over by the state because they had run out of money, and had a lot of fires, a lot of crime, a lot of violence, and we had a lot of large scale emergencies. So I really became interested in managing disaster and disaster medicine. So I eventually met up with a physician who had a disaster medicine fellowship out of the Beth Israel. I worked for him doing some work helping develop that program, and eventually became the assistant and then associate director of this disaster medicine fellowship, which was to train physicians and then eventually nurses, to work in disaster medicine. We were contacted by World Extreme Medicine, I think back in 2013. They were holding a conference in London and wanted the director of that program to speak there. He went and spoke, and then the next year they said, hey, we'd like you to host this in Boston. So I helped them host that conference here in Boston, had a wonderful time. And I just stayed in touch with Mark Hannaford, who's the CEO and director of that program. Over the years, did a few things here and there together. But then in the last few years, they really wanted to kind of expand the scope of what World Extreme Medicine does. I did some podcasts for them, so enjoyed doing that. Yep. And then, started doing some programming here in the States. Most of their programming is in the UK or other countries, and they wanted to, have a footprint here. So I helped develop that. And from there, we wanted to expand this out and really start to professionalize, people working in the bubble of austere medicine, extreme medicine. A lot of the programming that's out there is really great, from some of the organizations that do it, but, they're piecemeal. And we wanted to come together and put something together that would really professionalize, people who want to work in this industry and who want to become leaders in working in disaster or humanitarian or austere environments. We pitched this program, the Extreme Medicine Certificate Program, to my colleagues at Northeastern. They were incredibly excited about it. And then, it took about really probably a year and a half, 2 years to develop it. But what we have now is an extreme medicine graduate certificate. So it's a professional graduate certificate, and soon we're going to have a Doctor of Medical Science in Extreme Medicine program starting in fall of 2024. And what this program is, it's basically courses that are providing the skill set and especially the leadership skills for, again, people who want to work in humanitarian fields, who want to do disaster medicine, who want to work in expedition medicine. It's really helping to give them that skill set and professionalize those occupations. The other piece of that, there are two other pieces in my mind. One is just building a really strong community of connections. So we want to make everyone feel that this is really a family. So when you've joined our program, you've joined, the Northeastern family, you've joined the World Extreme Medicine family, but you've also now have some new family and your colleagues and friends that are also in the program. And the second piece is research. The research is really lacking in these areas. Research on hypothermia, research on the stability of blood products in austere environments, research on different materials that you can use. I know you interviewed a friend and colleague of mine, Scott Johnson, who's doing work on, cold chain. We're working with our engineering department to look at biodegradable, monitoring sensors. So we really want to build this into, not only academia, but research in extreme and austere medicine. And, in our first year, we have a great cohort of people. We have a lot of interest, internationally in what we're doing. And so it's been a real exciting start to the program.
Well, it sounds like there's some incredible experiences that you've had there, and there's so much that's kind of applicable across a number of different areas. You've touched on leadership and some of the things that you might learn when you're out in the field and when you're kind of like providing care and all of those types of things. And then also we've kind of like touched on innovation, as you say, with Scott, who we obviously we touched on and we mentioned there. We spoke about phase change materials and providing, cooling systems, as you say, so that cold chain storage can facilitate medicines getting to places where they may not otherwise have made it, with the integrity that they need, and then obviously getting back. What are some of the experiences that most stick out for you with your work in World Extreme Medicine so far? And then we'll kind of like dig into some of the other bits and pieces. I'm super keen to hear a little bit more about the skills that you think might be applicable for people who may be working in hospitals, kind of like doing their day-to-day, doing the do, who might be able to benefit from getting involved in this work. And then maybe also talking a little bit about the innovation stuff. But I want to hear your experiences first.
Yeah, so there's two areas that really interest me. One is crisis resource leadership and crisis resource management and human factors. So, that is that actually started in the aviation industry during the 1980s when they're experiencing some issues with some crashes, and they realized that these human factors really played a significant role in a lot of these unfortunate accidents. And so it originally started as what was called cockpit resource management, or CRM, and over time has now developed to crisis resource management, CRM still, but hasn't been widely adopted by the medical industry, but we do use it a lot in the operating arena. So in the OR and in anesthesia, they've really taken this, kind of concept, and to some degree in the emergency department. But to me, it's a really, important aspect of care in whatever environment you're in. And it really is just, what are the human factors that you're dealing with in medicine, be it in an extreme or austere setting, or even just, on a day-to-day in the emergency department. When you think about fatigue and how many shifts people have been working, or just what personnel you're working with. And then the crisis resource management part, which is, how do you assume leadership roles? How do you take a team and make a group of people you might not ever have worked with and make it cohesive? And what are the different things, to do to, bring that together for, a successful, day, be it deep in the woods, be it high in the mountains, or be it just, on a medical floor in some hospital. So that's one of my big areas. And I teach that course in our program. I teach a course called Crisis Resource Management. We use a lot of different case studies. We do a lot of, discussion around leadership success, leadership failures. We also do this in most of the experience courses as well. So we just had the first expedition in wilderness medicine course for World Extreme Medicine here in New Hampshire. And, the first thing we did was, an exercise on crisis resource management. And then the second thing we did was, a thing on teamwork and leadership that, involves kind of them having to use some ingenuity to figure out and do some problem solving. The other piece that I really, have an interest in, and this stems, you're going to hear that I wear many hats, have done many things, not that there are people who've done much more extensive things than I've done. But I also have an interest in ethics, and I did a fellowship at Harvard Medical School in bioethics, and I'm currently a fellow at the Harvard Law School in bioethics. And my interest in ethics really, from the medical standpoint, has been, in opioids and the opioid epidemic. But I also have a real interest in the ethics of expedition and the ethics of disaster. Some people think that, when you go to a different country and you're doing humanitarian work, right, you can leave ethics, you can put ethics out the door, put ethics out the window, and, you can use expired meds, or you can practice beyond your skill set or capabilities. And that's just not the case. And we really need to, engage in more ethics in disaster, in humanitarian work, and similarly in disaster work as well. We really, there's a strong need to have, kind of more concrete ethical principles in working in that environment. And so I'm helping to co-teach, our extreme ethics course as well, which touches on expedition, humanitarian. We talk a little bit about, war zones and conflict, human trafficking. It's the other course that I really enjoy teaching in. And so those are kind of my, main areas of interest, and what I think, we kind of bring to the table that might be a little bit unique to other programs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. This is one of those conversations that you engage in and you realize how stupid you feel compared to someone who's done so much. It's absolutely incredible, the work that you're doing, Stephen. I'm totally blown away by it. With the work that you're doing in the kind of like the leadership regard, are there any kind of like core pillars or tenets that you see, that you teach on the course, that you have, that you think have applicability and you'd like to see kind of reach more professionals out to, and not just the extreme medicine world, but actually, in the day-to-day field that they're engaging with?
Yeah. So one, I'll start by saying I probably have the shortest resume of all the people that are working in
Oh
my
goodness,
program.
I'm going to feel massive anxiety
Yeah.
and insecurity.
Trust me. I feel like you can, when I talk to some of my, colleagues that I have teaching for us, I feel a bit of an imposter syndrome, especially some of the people that we bring in to do the experience courses. We have some people who've climbed, all 7 peaks. And so like I've been, trudging along in the woods of New Hampshire. That's nothing compared to what they've done. And it's I'm always humbled by that. So my resume is definitely the shortest. But yeah, I think, one of the things, especially, that we see in not only, the medical field, but I see this a lot in, people that are working in austere environments or, in expedition, is that, we tend to think that just seniority it plays the most important role in being a leader. And if the longer you've been around, the more senior you are. And, I've seen this in places where I work. This person is our lead director now, or our chairperson, or our leader because, well, they've been here the longest. And so, that's who's going to be in charge. And, that's really not the case. I really think that, again, and this is part of why we're doing this program, is that, we really need to develop leaders. We need to professionalize leaders and provide them with those skill sets. There are some people that are certainly natural leaders and that they can, that the minute they step in, that they're going to take that leadership role and they just have that natural personality. For those others of us, there's a learned skill to that, and learning, how to work with all sorts of different people, different cultures, different opinions, and how to take those into account and ensure that the team is going to perform at their best. And so I think understanding that leaders, we have to develop them, and that while there are going to be some natural leaders, there really is it's important, I think, in all fields, to professionalize and educate people to become leaders. And that's not really something that's very common. In my program as a paramedic, then as a nurse, and then a nurse practitioner, we never really had any courses on leadership, or how do you develop as a leader, how do you give feedback to people. Those things weren't just really part of the curriculum. And similarly, it's not necessarily part of the curriculum in medicine as well. Those are things that people are just expected to kind of develop over time. So I think really, the biggest take-home point for me is that we need to develop and professionalize and provide that skill set and provide that information for people to become healthcare leaders. And one of the programs that we're building on, so the certificate program, is now leading to a doctorate in medical science, and that doctorate is in healthcare leadership. And so you can do a concentration in extreme medicine, but I think it's going to be a really great transition for people who really want to have that leadership role and professionalize it, to have that core content, and to have a skill set and a toolbox, to better understand the dynamics of teams and the dynamics of human factors, and how to become a good leader. And that's going to really help to ensure that when we're managing these disasters, you're developing humanitarian efforts, that you have that leadership and skill set.
Talk to me about some of the ethical considerations that you have to bear in mind. You mentioned when you're going into different situations, you might be going into a war zone, you might be going into other crises that you're going to help. What are the ethical considerations that you bear in mind, that you teach through the course, that people need to be aware of when they're going into these extreme situations?
Yeah, I think one of the most important ones is, kind of respect for that culture and respect for that community. I see there's something we call, kind of humanitarianism, which is, people going in and spending, 1 or 2 weeks in these really, non-sustainable projects, which makes everyone feel, pretty good. And I've done them myself. But, it's really about, recognizing that, we certainly can bring something to the table for providing humanitarian care, but also that, you have a lot to learn from that culture and from that community as well, and respecting that culture, respecting that community, and, not really forcing our ways. And our, Western medicine has some really, good things to offer, but we also have our limitations. And I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we went to this X country and worked in this X clinic, and we taught them so much about certain things." And I never like to hear that. I think that what you should be going down is you're learning from them, and you're helping to integrate into their culture.
Exactly what I was going to say to you. It seems like actually the more appropriate thing that you want to hear is like, well, the question that you naturally want to ask is, well, what did you learn? It's actually, what have you learned from them? Because, in those situations, I'm imagining that there's probably people making do with what they have that probably you could learn an awful lot from and apply in your own practice and your own kind of work day to day, rather than just treating it like you say as humanitarianism, where it's just, oh yeah, I'm going to be delivering all of this great knowledge from the top of the mount to you, and you sort of have to just listen to it and take it. It's almost
Right.
counterintuitive. You want to be able to absorb some of the richness of what they've experienced.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that's critically important. And, similarly, making sure that you're working within your skill set as well. A lot of people will go into these communities and they'll say, well, I work as a nurse, but I'm going to learn how to suture and I'm going to suture, here. Well, if that's not part of your clinical scope, it shouldn't be part of your clinical scope when you're going into these settings either. And you
Agree.
should be, really practicing within the scope of practice that you have. I think the other area that is really important to me is, we kind of, if you look at the landscape of humanitarian work, it's really kind of still colonialism, in that, most of the NGOs that provide humanitarian care are U.S. based or based in, wealthier European countries. Most of the people doing research in these areas and that are publishing and have authorship of, these publications are based in the U.S. or based in, European countries. Most of the opportunity for education in, global health and public health are not accessible to those people that are in these, developing or resource poorer countries. And we need to switch. We need to change that.
Yeah.
If we're going into sub-Saharan Africa, right, they should be designing, developing, and leading that research. And we should be spectators and maybe helping to some degree. But that's really, what we should be doing. And we just see a lot of colonialism still in how global health is and public health is done in these countries, and we need to really shift that paradigm as well.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a it's a massive thing that Scott and I spoke about as well on the previous conversation, where the work that he's doing is to enable that connectivity, right? To enable people to have the connectivity to the internet, to resources, to knowledge that they'll be able to use in order to kind of upskill themselves, to develop their own, ways of treating things, and to really find the opportunity spaces for themselves that level them up. Rather
yeah,
than, as you say, this kind of colonial approach where we just kind of like march on in or go on in and say, you've got to do it how we do it. When I love the analogy that Scott uses, obviously with the fishing holes, where he talks about you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you give him a net, you teach him how, and you feed him for a lifetime. Well, yeah, but you also have to show him where those fishing holes are and where he's going to be able to get
right,
that catch. And
right,
I shared with Scott a little thing that I'd heard, which was about a hot dog vendor basically, and he was trying to sell hot dogs, and he's out of nowhere, a genie appears, and he says to him, if you could have one wish, what would it be, to make your stand as successful as it could be? And the guy's like, oh, well, I want to have the best tasting hot dogs, bar none. And genie's like, no, I don't think that's the one. Try again. And he says, oh, well, I want to have the fastest cooking hot dogs, so that way I'll sell more and they'll be done. He's like, no, I don't think that's it. He says, oh, okay, well, he says to the genie, what would you wish for? And he says, well, what about putting it on the busiest street corner so that when people are coming out of their buildings, they want your hot dog? And it's all
right,
about that. It's about
right,
providing, having those things in the right locations. And as you say, having those points of entry in sub-Saharan Africa, wherever it might be, so that they can lead the charge in that research themselves and actually
right.
level that playing field up is so vital and so important. Um,
Yep.
with that being said, kind of, what are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned from your work in these communities and these places where you've actually had an opportunity to learn from the people on the ground, in your work?
Yeah, no, I think, I learned that lesson in Haiti, which is that, these people, while they're one of the poorest countries in the world, they are impressively resilient, creative, and brilliant with using what they can in these really resource poor areas to provide the care that they can, and that again, this was a little earlier in my career, thinking, well, I'm going to go and here's what I'm going to do, and but really taking that time and listening and learning from those people, I thought was the most valuable lesson that I learned, and it was that these people are resilient. These people have been doing it this way for many many years. While it may not be the way we do it, it's the way they're doing it because it's what's worked, and how what they've been able to do to maintain that resiliency. And so I just really engaged that culture and really was impressed by all of that. And I think that was the big take home message for me, that I'm not going in and saying you have hypertension and prescribing blood pressure medication. That is what happens in many cases, but it's instead listening to what they do, what they find important, what things you can or can't change, and just trying to make things the best for that person. We here in the US, we'd say, well, you have hypertension, you need to change your diet, you need to exercise more, and we're gonna if that doesn't work, we're gonna put you on a blood pressure medication. Well, if you can't necessarily always change your diet, right? If you're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in the fields, and you can't afford medications, that's not the right solution. And so we really need to be, more considerate of, what people have for resources and how do we use them, and not pushing our principles on people. And so that's what I learned in that environment. And, it's what I now teach, and what I teach, throughout not just the extreme medicine program, but in the nursing program that I teach. We do a lot of discussion around social justice issues. We do a lot of discussion around inequities. So it relates. The population that I serve here in Boston, I work in an ER that serves a lot of people from Haiti and from Vietnam, and it's not akin to the same care there, but it's really a lot of people who are marginalized, underinsured, haven't been treated very well by the healthcare system, and so bringing those principles back to the ER, even though I'm in the urban environment, and respecting the different cultures and the different ways that people can manage illness. We have people who use coining, rubbing coins on the back to help with fever. And while we may think, well, that's crazy, why are you doing that? We should be respectful of. They tried that and it wasn't working, so they knew to come into the emergency department, and just having that respect and learning from them. You can learn a lot from some of the things that they're utilizing to treat disease. Some of that stuff is still around because it does work, and it has some efficacy. And so we have to be respectful of that, and put aside our really our prejudices for Western medicine being the best, and just engaging in the unique experiences of those cultures.
Yeah, I think that's so important and so powerful. I think actually one of the things that strikes me there is, with the respect, having, those old school practices or kind of things that they may have done, as you say, they do still in some cases work. So have the respect to acknowledge that those guys are using the best with what they have. And actually, it reminds me of the phrase, necessity is the mother of all invention. It's
right.
You found a solution to something. It's not, is it ideal? Perhaps not, but you know that it works. So respect the fact that that is something that exists, and then have the patience and the humility to engage with people on an individual level, to be able to kind of talk to them and say, okay, completely respect what you're doing here. We could also show you potentially another way if you're interested in that. And that doesn't diminish the work that you've done previously. It doesn't diminish the work that you and the knowledge that you already have, but it could be an appended piece of information, an appended piece of insight that enables you to do, to enable a treatment that might be more effective, as you say. With some of these treatments that you've kind of like seen, what's some of the ones that I guess stand out as the ones that have proven most surprising in terms of ones that you've found on these journeys?
Oh, well, I mean, there's one that I kind of bought into and used to do, and then I realized there's no science behind this, and it's really just kind of not really just kind of a placebo. But the Vietnamese population will apply these adhesives to their feet, and it's supposed to drain all the toxins from your body. And you would peel them off and it looked like, oh, there are all these toxins in it. It was really just sweat. So whatever, you know, but yeah, I was like, oh, I saw that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this. And so when I got home, I, tried it and I'd put them on and I'd be like, oh yeah, I feel so much better. These toxins have been, removed from my body. And then I looked it up and really, yeah, it's just sweat. That's, there are no toxins. They've done chemical analysis. It's just basically sweat. It's not removing toxins. So but I bought into it. I bought into the placebo effect of it. It seemed to work. Every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I should try that again, even knowing like it's not doing anything. But the placebo effect can sometimes have a really, important role in medicine as well. I think coining, the first time I saw coining, I was incredibly, I was alarmed. I thought it was some sort of, systemic skin lesions until someone said, no, that's just coining because it looks like, big round bruises all over someone's body. Yeah. I thought they, had hemolytic anemia or some meningococcal, disease. And it, I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it. And so that was pretty surprising. I will say I have not tried that. I have not delved into coining. So
yeah, I have to say, I don't think it's one I'll be trying anytime soon myself. But as we say, we'll remain respectful of it. If it works for some people, as you say, the power of belief and the placebo effect, it does have its place. So I think the next question I wanted to ask you was around some of the innovations that you've seen within, the treatment. Obviously, taking these extreme situations, presumably there's going to have been some kind of amazing innovations in terms of getting the medicines to these places, the delivery systems of those medicines, and the tech that's kind of emerging as, obviously you probably had devices from 20 years ago that were massive and now they're way, way smaller as kind of technology's progressed. What are some of are you seeing a lot of that in the work? Are you seeing a lot of that in the field? And are there any things that you're particularly excited about? Sorry, I realized I've wrapped 3 questions in one there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, to be quite honest, I think, and I'll talk about some things that I've seen that I really am excited about and think has a lot of potential. But, we really still haven't innovated, as extensively as one would think with regard to some of the really critically important issues. And one of them is, cold chain, and how do we get, vaccines to areas without electricity and store those vaccines and transport those vaccines and then deliver them. How do we do that in a way that is sustainable? And how do you do that when there's no electricity or infrastructure? And so I think, we really haven't had a lot of, strides in those areas. And I think that's a very critically important area. And similarly, we just saw this really kind of with the COVID, pandemic. How quickly are we getting this data out about emerging, infections? And, we saw with COVID, it took some time, right, to get that information out. So how do we build a global infrastructure that allows us to really monitor these things and sound the alarm when we start to see things go awry? So I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable, using solar power, using biodegradable materials. That's one of the things that one of my colleagues in the engineering department at Northeastern is working on, is making flexible biosensors that are solar powered and biodegradable for monitoring heart rate and
Yeah,
oxygen
I
saturation.
wanted to dive into
Yeah,
that and find out a little bit more about it, because I completely agree with you in terms of, yes, we do need this better approach for a more connected global system where we can sound the alarm. Obviously, if we've got the cold chain storage and all of that sort of stuff, facilitating the transit of lab results so we can identify maybe the next zoonotic disease. That's one thing,
right.
but fascinated in terms of how you do that in a sustainable manner that doesn't, create more plastics, more waste, more other hazardous materials. So fascinated to hear about what these biodegradable materials and sensors that you're working on and your colleague is working on might be.
Yeah, so it's certainly engineering is not my foray. I'm terrible at math, so I've never even considered it. But yeah, so what that lab is working on is really these biodegradable polymers that that are self-sustaining. So they're self-sustaining, they're biodegradable, but they can do all the kind of monitoring that we would want to get for people on an expedition or people in extreme environments. And so, that's the area that they're working on. We're going to be hearing more about that. We have a symposium coming up in March called Extremes of Cold. And it's a symposium bringing people working in, the field of hypothermia or high altitude medicine, or just people who work in really cold environments, coming together to talk about the problems that they face. And then after they're going to present that material, and then we're going to build teams, interdisciplinary teams, and do what's called a hackathon, where people are going to come together, take those problems and try to solve them over the course of a couple of months. That will culminate in this big hackathon in May, and we'll see what we come up with. It's all about ingenuity and interdisciplinary, teams. One of the things, a lot of these things are oftentimes siloed. So I really want to bring people from all fields to kind of work on these problems. So we've invited people from the healthcare industry, but also people from our Center for Design, which is art and materials, and we're inviting our engineering colleagues and our biochemistry colleagues, and trying to bring all these minds together to say, how do you solve these problems that we have, and in a sustainable way. So we have that symposium, but also the hackathon, and then just ongoing kind of developing this network of people to continue to solve these problems.
Yeah. This is so inspiring, and I think it's answering a question that I think naturally comes on from this, which is obviously with us, our field of experience and expertise is in the design space, but it just goes to show that design thinking and thinking about ecosystems can really play a role and have an impact in global health challenges, and how being able to step back from something and apply a different lens, a different perspective, can have so much impact. And I love the fact that you're doing these hackathons. What are some of the topics that are on the docket for the hackathons, or is it completely kind of like open brief? Just choose a problem that you maybe want to tackle that hasn't been thought about in a particular way, and you get all of these different folks from different disciplines just going after that.
Yeah, it's kind of going to be a mix of that. So we have some speakers talking. So we have someone from what's called the Natick Labs. That's the U.S. Army Hypothermia Lab, coming to talk about dexterity and in extremes of cold. and he's going to talk about hypothermia, but also problems with dexterity and how do we ensure that people have that dexterity in extremes of cold. How do
Yeah.
we enhance that? Another colleague coming to talk about trauma care in the cold, and can we deliver certain medications? Can we actually give blood to people in the field in extremes? I'm going to talk about pharmacologic stability. We have, again, we'll bring Scott Johnson back up. He's going to talk about, sustainable storage, both in cold and extreme heat. We have Canik Fuentes, who's the engineer I was just talking about, to talk about those biosensors. So we have a real mix of people. They have their ideas about some of these problems, but then we're going to encourage our participants. We've only been advertising this for about a week, and we already have 50 people who've signed up across the world, because we're going to have it live, but also live streamed. We want them to come up with problems as well. So we'll then take those probably 4 or 5 most important questions and allow people to come together, develop teams, and work on those problems that will then culminate in that hackathon. And we did something similar. I also teach a very interesting course with a friend and colleague of mine named Jeanette Andrews, who's a professional magician.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I've been doing magic. I'm an amateur magician, very much amateur. But we met and developed a course called Magic in Healthcare, and it uses all the principles of what magicians use, and how does that relate to healthcare. So, for instance, decision forcing, or bias, or memory. A lot of the neuroscience behind these. But we did a hackathon where we brought in people. We had basically a medical kit, a central line kit, and said, look, we want to see if people can redesign this and make it more user friendly, make it sustainable. But we don't want, we don't want it just to be healthcare people. So we brought in the Center for Design, so systems thinking people and people who work with different materials and different design. We brought in engineers. We brought in people in the healthcare, arena, and we actually had some physicists there. We had a whole bunch of different people, and they came together and did just incredibly. And the idea was they had to use magic props, or these principles behind magic and magic props to redesign it. And we had a full day, and what they came up with was just incredible. And so it was so inspiring to see that people from all these different fields who never have used this kit and who didn't do magic or didn't really know a lot about magic could take all these concepts, put them together, and come up with these just incredible designs. And so that's what we hope to do, in this field as well, and not just silo it and open it up to people that might not have any idea what it's like to work in expedition or extreme circumstances, but they can bring some fresh ideas. They can bring some systems design thinking. They can bring lots of energy to these things. And so, that's what we are hoping to get from this as well, which is just a diversity of people coming together and just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing, what sticks, and coming up with some unique ideas. So it's super fun. Yeah.
It sounds so fun, and it's so inspiring. I think the cognitive diversity piece is so important. As you say, getting people from all different backgrounds, applying things like magic. I love that. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah. And some of the neuroscience behind that is incredible. Yes. With that, it kind of prompts me to ask the question. Obviously, I'd assume that there's, within World Extreme Medicine, you'd probably have a certain clinical background or anything like that. So you'd want to be a doctor or a nurse or anything like that. What type of people can get involved with World Extreme Medicine if they want to? Can other people from different walks of life get involved with it, and how might they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that field is filled with diversity, and one of the things I really enjoy is they have an annual conference. WEM has an annual conference in Edinburgh, Scotland. So aside from Edinburgh being just a fantastic city that I really love love the area. But the conference brings together these people who've just had these really unique experiences, and sometimes who have these small niches of expertise, or they do something in this area that has really affected change, even though you're like it's a small little thing. But wow, that really actually is something we should all be doing. I remember hosting one of the talks, and one of the talks was this physician who said, I wanted to get rid of all the styrofoam in my hospital because styrofoam is terrible for the environment. And he put together a project, and he put all the numbers together and demonstrated to his hospital why they should be making this change. And it's one of the best talks I've ever been to, right? And you wouldn't think that that's an extreme medicine, thing, but
Yeah.
realistically it is, because it affects our environment and it affects, sustainability. So yeah, traditionally, what you see is a lot of physicians, a lot of nurses, a lot of paramedics, but I've also seen journalists, photographers. I've seen people who are in, the business realm, who want to maybe look at how do we do microfinancing and support, people, in developing countries with that. So there's, it's an open arena. It's an open family of people, and very much welcoming. And I think it takes that diversity. It's not all about medicine. It is about how do we, sustainably finance. It's about climate, and so we need people that understand climate science, and how do we do this work sustainably. We need ethicists. We need educators. So honestly, while traditionally most of the people that are probably involved in, World Extreme Medicine or WMS or other organizations are clinicians, really, when come down to it, we need other people involved as well. And WEM is obviously welcoming to that. And so I have met people who are journalists. I've met people who are photographers, people who are documentarians,
Yeah.
that are involved as well.
Well, I think that's incredible because it shows that, as you say, it's embracing of the diversity that from the cognitive lens, from the documentation lens or the documentary lens. I also think that's part of the awareness piece, and actually
Yes.
those individuals being able to raise the profile of these diseases and or the work that's being done. And I think one of the key things that struck a chord there was thinking about, you touched on the environmental side of things. And I think this is sort of something that Scott and I also spoke about, where there is a bit of a justice issue in terms of, look, the way in which we've gone about things in the Western world and globally, to fuel our economic growth has not been so great for sustainable, sustainability on the planet. So there's a real question around, okay, well, we've created some of these problems and they're getting worse because of the effects that we've caused on the planet. So we've really got to step up our efforts in order to tackle some of those things. So having those other scientists, having those other people that have that environmental lens is so crucial to that work as well. It occurs to me, at least.
No, I agree. I agree, and I think that one of the actual discussions and projects that I have my students work on this semester in the extreme ethics course is Mount Everest, and the amount of trash that gets dumped onto that mountain. Um, every person, I think the number is 17 to 20 pounds of garbage or waste that they leave behind when they do an expedition. And you think about that, and it's just horrifying to think about, all the human waste and plastics and all of this that we're depositing on this, natural wonder of the world, without really any consideration for that. And so they all have to, do a little research and do a little mini podcast about that, and how do we change that? And we see that not just with that, but we see it with lots of other, expeditions and projects, where once people leave that area and they just leave all this trash behind, or they might leave buildings or gasoline or vehicles or all these, just all this waste that goes into, these things. And we really need to think about how do we do that more sustainably.
100%. And actually, that touches on the point about why the ethics of these things are so important.
Yes.
The other part of the course that you're involved in, that you teach, and making sure that people understand the impact that you're not just there. You need to think about this thing holistically, and don't leave it in a worse place than where you found it. Actually, go there, be of service, be of value, and when you leave, be mindful of the impact that you've had, both positively and negatively. I think it's really important.
No, absolutely. And, again, the other piece of that is, I've heard of or I knew of an organization where, they would bring people in for a week to do some work in a developing country. And part of that is that, they housed these people safely, but they shipped food in from the United States. And, think about that. What that does is it hurts the local economy. You're also you're increasing the carbon footprint by shipping all these food products,
Yeah,
across the
huge carbon
globe.
footprint increase,
Yeah.
and then, as you say, hurting the local economy, because you essentially should be buying from traders, from local, suppliers that would help
Yep.
their economy, and you're just bringing in a load of stuff from outside that's going to be of benefit to no one, going to end up with a load of trash,
Yep.
probably going to the landfill and all that sort of stuff. And generally, actually, rather than helping, you're compounding a problem.
100%. 100%. And so, we need to really hold people accountable and hold these organizations accountable for that, and develop maybe a code of ethics for how do you do this sustainably, and how do you do it sustainably? How do you do it so that you're supporting the local, economies, and supporting the local people, right? If you're going to go there and do some work in that country, you need to, embrace it and engage in that country, and work with them. And, yes, it could, we don't want people getting hurt. We don't want people, drinking water that's unsafe or things of that nature. But, we need to make sure that there's a code of ethics around how we do this ethically.
What are some of the things that you'd like to see? I know, obviously, if you had a magic wand, what are some of the things that you'd like to see really being considered, and trends going forward as it pertains to world extreme medicine? Obviously, we've touched on the ethical side of things and more consideration around
Yeah.
that. Are there any other aspects that you'd really like to see more effort made in, or areas that you'd like to see more effort made in?
Yeah, I mean, well, I do have a magic wand because I'm an amateur magician, so of course I have multiple magic wands, but they don't seem to do what I would want them to do in this arena. But what I'd like to see is again really kind of thinking about the colonialism of how we approach global health, and really start to open up, the way that we do things to be more inclusive. And we should be developing people in the countries that we're doing this research in. We should be developing them as leaders and empowering them to be the lead researcher, to be the PI, to be, running, these studies. They should be developing the study questions. Just because we say, oh, we want to see if this, works for malaria, right? Well, what are their study questions? What's important to their culture, and what do they want to be doing? The other, thing that I would do is every educational institution that's doing work, be it Harvard, be it, University of Exeter, be it, Yale, whoever's doing research in these areas, they should then be offering, free spaces to provide education at all levels. So, we need to have, an infrastructure of nurses. We need to have an infrastructure of, developing physicians and scientists. So if you're going to go do work, and you're really taking from that culture, right? You're taking data, and you're building, your database of research and literature. We should be giving back. And so, it should be, if we're going to, be going and doing research as a university, that university should open its doors to those people, free of charge, providing that same level of education and enriching, that environment, but in a way that's not forcing our objectives on them. We need to
Yeah.
make sure that education is inclusive and that we learn from them and get to hear from, this is your thought on an approach to global health, but let me tell you how it is, and what we face and what we feel is the solution, and being kind of inclusive. To me, that would be fantastic if we could really have a shared worldwide kind of university that would improve our approach to global health. So I think that's what we need to be really looking at is how do we improve globalization of education and sharing ideas and developing those research questions that are important not just to us but important to the people that are actually living that have that lived experience.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, and it's a really powerful statement. I think leveling up in a way that's equitable, in a way that's empowering people rather than condescending, rather than talking down to them, and telling them there's only one way to do something. I think is an incredibly powerful message, and it's something that I think everyone should be pushing for as a society. As I say, it's about leveling up and making that fair. Stephen, this
Yes.
has been absolutely sensational. It's been wonderful to chat to you, and I think that's a fantastically powerful note for us to probably wrap things up on.
Sure.
If people want to find you, where can they go? How can they get involved with WEM and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. They can find me in Boston. So I'm located in Boston, but yeah, they can certainly contact me by email, and I can, give you the emails that I use if you want to put those in show notes. But if they
Absolutely, we
want to,
will.
perfect. If they want to get involved in World Extreme Medicine, WEM has a website. They have a membership. They have a ton of resources and materials. So if they go to, just Google World Extreme Medicine, or I think it's just worldextrememedicine.com, they can, find out all about World Extreme Medicine. There's a ton of great podcasts, webinars. They list all their experience courses. They, have their conference, highlights. And the other thing I would highly recommend is going to one of the conferences, meeting the people, hearing some speakers. They hold that every year in November. And then from the Northeastern side, northeastern.edu. Or you just Google Northeastern University Extreme Medicine. That will bring you to our website, has all the information about the Extreme Medicine Certificate Program. And like I mentioned, fall of 2024, we'll be offering our new Doctorate in Medical Science in Healthcare Leadership with a concentration in extreme medicine. That's, groundbreaking. That's going to really, I think, professionalize, this arena. And then also you can find me at the magicandmedicine.com, magicandmedicinelab.com. That talks about my work in magic in healthcare, and placebo effects and memory and misinformation. And we do workshops for healthcare providers around all of those topics. So that takes all of my interests and really packs them into one. So those are some of the sites that you can track me down.
Incredible. And I know that
Yeah.
we've only really spoken about WEM today, but I'd love to at some point in the future dive into some of those other aspects, including the magic and the behavioral science behind all of that. So
Yeah.
it's been wonderful talking to you, Stephen. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Hey, well, thank you so
Really
much,
appreciate
Johnny,
you.
and really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Take care, sir.
Thanks.